What I have for you today is three cases, all within the last 2 years, from France on long-term loss-making companies and how the French authorities attacked these structures and how they were successful in two, but not all three of them. So before wasting any more time, let's get going. The first case was for Elie Saab, and here you can see the details of the case. It is from June 2021, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Then we have two cases, and it concerns SKR or FSK, which is a ball bearing making company group based in Sweden, and they had a French subsidiary. And the reason why there are two cases is because there was both a transfer pricing adjustment made for corporate tax purposes, and under French law you then also get a deemed dividend for the difference in price to the parent, and so there was also an appeal against the dividend withholding tax. You don't have to do it in two cases, you can also do it in one, as we see in the case of ST DuPont, which makes lighters and a number of other usables. A 10-second commercial. If you want to learn more about international taxation or transfer pricing, or treat yourself to an all-round update, or if you want your team to learn or stay updated, please visit my online courses. So let us start with Elie Saab. The facts of Elie Saab was the company Elie Saab France asked the Administrative Court of Paris to discharge the additional corporate tax contributions to which it was subject for financial years ending in 2009 and 10, as well as the reminders of dividend withholding tax which were claimed from it for the years 2009 and 10, obviously for the size of the TP adjustments. Elie Saab was a 99.9% owned French subsidiary of the Lebanese Elie Saab Group, which carries on a retail business in luxury ready-to-wear clothing and accessories, as you can see from the picture in the middle. Article 57 of the General Tax Code, and this article plays in all these cases, establishes a presumption of an indirect transfer of profits when the administration establishes the existence of a link between dependents and such a transfer of profits. This presumption can only be usefully challenged if the taxpayer can prove that the advantages it granted were justified by obtaining consideration in exchange, in particular insofar as those advantages contribute to the development of the value of a brand owned by the parent of the taxpayer, like Elie Saab did here. And then the court says Elie Saab is responsible for the group management, manufacture, and distribution of top-of-the-range daywear. It distributes Elie Saab brand accessories for group entities plus haute couture line in France and for European customers, and it sells a line of evening wear and accessories developed by the group's Lebanese subsidiary in its Paris boutique and worldwide to boutiques distributing the brand. On top of that, it has a showroom in Paris for the brand's haute couture creations, for which it pays rent, property, fittings, and staff. It organizes fashion shows of the Elie Saab brand for the haute couture and ready-to-wear collections. It manages brand communication and promotions, and it's been loss-making since 2002 and incurring expenses for the benefit of the whole group. So this is the problem that the French tax authorities have. So the tax authorities reinstated for 2007 to 2010 expenses for the promotion of the Elie Saab brand, the organization of fashion shows that were not re-invoiced yet, and it added a top 5% margin for those expenses, and its press department. So the press department was also charged out the employees in there, plus a 5% markup. If we look at what the court has done with this, the court says, firstly by rejecting the argument of Elie Saab France that its payments have also been incurred for the exercise of its own activity as the group's profit center for accessories activity as the responsible party for high-end daytime ready-to-wear line. The court implicitly ruled that the tax authorities established the assumption of responsibility by Elie Saab for its parents' expenses. So the court just said, you were paying expenses that your parents should have been bearing, right? I mean, is the conclusion here. And second, The court did not err in law by holding that Elie Saab France had not established the existence of consideration to counter the transfer of profits to its parents. So Elie Saab said, yeah, but hang on, I mean, we also got stuff in return, right? And they argued the absence of re-invoicing by the parent of expenses the latter bore, so which the parent bore in Lebanon, for the entities of a group, like the expenses for support services, the contract with the television channel Fashion TV, and 2 co-managers for the parent and the creator of the group, right? Or the parent did not invoice a trademark fee. So Elie Saab France said, you know, I mean, they gave us all this other stuff for free and they didn't charge us a license fee, so we're okay. And the court says, no, that's not the way things work. You need to have adequate proof. And I think if we look at this case, the takeaway from it is, would Elie Saab have been more successful if it was more specific in its defenses, right? Now, in the next case, we're looking at SKF. And as you can see, the structure, SKF in Sweden holds SKF Holding in France, which holds RKS, and SKF Holding in France and RKS form a consolidated group. So let's have a look at the facts. RKS, which manufactures very large custom bearings for civil and military industries, is controlled by the Swedish SKF Group through SKF Holding France. The tax authorities questioned the prices which RKS invoiced for its products to SKF distribution companies. Finally, SKF Holding France, as head of the integrated group to which RKS belongs, so after this questioning, was subject to an additional corporate income tax and social security contributions for 2009 and 10 of 5.4 million euros, including penalties. Now, a difference established by the administration between prices charged by a French company to its related companies and the prices charged between unrelated companies, so in other words, a difference in arm's length prices, may not be an advantage to be reintegrated into the company's results. So that difference cannot be added to the profit of the company if it is justified by the company's risks. The company must then justify both that it had to assume these risks and that its results are explained by the realization of these risks, right? So what the court here says is that maybe RKS had extra risk, but it also implicitly says that the companies which were arm's length companies apparently did not have these risks, right? The administration applied a TNMM by comparing the net margin to turnover of RKS with the average of 8 unrelated companies and adjusted RKS margins from minus 10.5% in 2009 to minus 22% in 2010, and it adjusted those to 2.3 for 2009 and 2.6 for 2010. RKS, on the other hand, justified the difference, arguing that it had a bigger functional role than production only. It wasn't just a low-cost, low-risk manufacturer, as it assumed a development and commercial risk which affected its operating profit, right? So let's see what the court did with this. The court said, first, the court committed an error of law, so this is what Conseil said, by holding that RKS was not liable for economic losses related to the operation of its business, as it was not the main contractor within the SK Group, without investigating whether its functional position was such that it could not be held liable and whether it had the right to bear strategic risks linked to the choice to develop new products and operational risk linked to efficiency of the production processes. So what the court here says is, you know, they could have done more things and you should have followed up on those arguments. Secondly, by failing to state adequate reasons, it invalidated its decision in holding that the negative margin for RKS was not the result of the risks assumed. The Administrative Court of Appeal noted that the SKF group result was between 6 and 14%, so the group was profitable as a whole, that RKS purchases of raw material was stable, so it didn't pay more for raw materials than it did before, and that its sales did not drop, except for wind turbines, right? It thus did not respond to RKS' argument that it suffered the consequences of its choice to solely focus on the wind power sector. Now this sounds like a pretty serious allegation, because if RKS decided to solely focus on the wind power sector, then you can't just as government say that your sales didn't drop except for wind, but we're ignoring that. Right? It's a bit of a strange thing that happens here, and in looking at this case, one wonders, and one has to say the court is right to argue that There does not only have to be one risk taker in a group, there can be more. And this is an important point, right? I mean, all the companies that do take risk are entitled to some part of the profit, but also have the responsibility to bear the losses related to those risks. And the court was right to argue that taxpayers' arguments, like a shift to wind power, should be considered. And the question is, how did RKS argue this point before the court compared to how Elie Saab has done it? Because clearly Elie Saab has tried to argue, but the court just blew all their arguments away. Whereas for RKS, they followed the taxpayers' argument. We'll look at the third case now. And what you'll see here is that this is a lower court, so by definition is more detailed than the Conseil d'État. But what I find interesting is the level of detail which the court and the tax authorities have dug into.